Hi everyone, I'm Trish Thomas, Head of Digital Innovation here at London Museum.
Hi, I'm Ben Heasman from Torchbox.
I'm Rob Tice from Knowledge Integration.
And we are going to talk to you today about how we're using AI in our new website to power connections between objects and stories to create more engagement for users, to create alt text for over 130,000 objects in our collection online, and also to transcribe our collection of oral histories for the first time in its history. The concept for the new website came out of a piece of digital audiences research that we did in 2022 to try and understand the motivations and the behaviours of our audiences and to understand the blockers for people who weren't engaging with us. And we kept hearing three things back from those people. First of all, they couldn't find a way into collections. When they found the way in, they couldn't find related stuff to the thing that they were looking at, so they kept coming across dead ends. And the third thing was, for some people, that they couldn't understand why our collections would be relevant to them in their lives today. So we knew that we had to create new ways in for contemporary audiences who were not specialists that would resonate with their lives today, and to create connected journeys between our collections and our stories to try to get them to stay on our site longer, fall down rabbit holes of discovery, and enjoy a collection in a way that they hadn't anticipated that they would previously. The most logical way to create connections between objects and stories would be to use metadata. But like most museums, when we look at the legacy metadata in our collections management system, we see quite a lot of inconsistencies, blank fields, variations on the same name. We needed to find another solution that could look at unstructured data and find connections in it. And so AI seemed like the most logical route to go down. Our audience research told us that relevance was a big problem for audiences who don't currently engage with London Museum and its content online. They perceived museums to be dusty old places from the past and couldn't understand why any of the stuff that we hold would be relevant to their lives today. Back in 2022, we had a grime exhibition here at London Wall. And because we have no grime objects in our collection, there was no grime-related content on the website. And audiences visiting were expecting to see content about Stormzy, about Dizzy Rascal, about grime as a subculture. So we realised that we needed to be thinking more broadly about content than just the stuff that is in our collection. London Museum's collection is London. And so in order to kind of create a content layer that people who were non-specialists could relate to, we came up with the idea of 1,000 London stories about London people, places, subjects and historic events. And the content that we've created is all search optimized and spans historic and contemporary stories, creating a new, really search friendly way for people to be drawn into the museum's editorial and collections. So the other hurdle we faced was that the taxonomy associated with our collections was really granular, the sorts of labels that non-specialists don't understand. And so as a way in, that was really inaccessible. So we created a new topic-based taxonomy of populist terms that non-specialist audiences could relate to, things like death and disaster, art and design. And we grouped the 1,000 London stories that we created against these terms to try to create connections where there were relationships.
One of the problems we tried to solve was the difference between literal and lateral content journeys. By literal content journeys, we mean focusing on an aspect of an object, like its name, coin. And if you follow that approach, you basically get a page full of coins that are related to an individual coin, which is not the most interesting journey to make. Using an AI-based approach, we can take aspects of unstructured metadata, let's say in a description, that might mention George V, it might mention Southampton, and those can be brought to the fore and used to change the journey to focus on more interesting aspects of the object metadata, like location, like time period. The content journeys were powered by the middleware layer in use in the platform, which is our SIM product. The technologies that we used, we plugged in IBM Watson, natural language understanding. That's a tool which can be used to extract concept and entities from unstructured data, and then those can be used to power that related content journey. Additionally, IBM Watson, where possible, aligns those entities and concepts to Wikidata IDs, so that also provides us with a natural controlled structure behind the scenes.
The London Museum website has a lot of rich content on it. And one of the big goals of the project was really around how to help users get from, say, for example, a Google search about Stormzy into a collection story online, into the collection itself. And one of the exciting ways that we've been involved in the website from a content management system point of view is we've been helping to understand how we can create those really rich and deep connections between website content itself. And one of the things we've done is use a tool called Yake, and Yake simply extracts keywords from content on a page and then passes them over to the collections database, and essentially gets returned a set of objects that relate to that collection story. So for example, you might be on a story page about Stormzy, and then you might get taken on a journey through to suffragettes via the path of activism. And it creates these really rich, deep connections for users as they're interacting with the content on the website itself. The other technology we've used on the website side is OpenAI, and we use their tool which enables us to create embeddings from the content on the website. Now, embeddings are essentially mathematical representations of the content. And then we use a vector index to compare those mathematical representations, those embeddings, to find the most similar content to the one we've passed across. And that helps us to really create those connections, lateral connections with other content on the website. And it's really important that we've given editors the primary responsibility for curating these manual links, should they need to. But then what we can do with the AI generated links is essentially top up what the editors have selected to create those really deep lateral onward journeys for users.
IBM Watson, for example, offers 30,000 free operations a month. And above that, it's 0.002 of a penny per text operation. So you can actually do an awful lot of work for relatively small amounts of money.
Yake is essentially free. It runs on the server. It essentially has lightweight algorithms that enable you to provide those keyword extraction tools. And in terms of OpenAI, the cost really depends on the model that you use. So for the model that we've chosen, it costs $1 for 12,500 pages of embeddings to be created.
So the results so far have been great, really encouraging. We've had a 525% uplift in traffic to our collections online, which has been amazing. We've seen a GA4 engagement rate of around 66%, which is well above the site average. And our London Stories content, that new editorial layer, is now indexing in the top 10 Google search results for over 1,000 keywords. So it's really promising in the way it's landing with more audiences, going on deeper, more engaged journeys.
I would advise them to start small and build from there. One of the things we did was essentially started with a series of concepts that we wanted to explore and worked from there. And I think it's fair to say that where we are now is not where we expected we'd be at the start. We adapted as new technologies came out and we explored different approaches. So explore what's possible and what aligns with your organizational and your user needs, then test that, and then finally learn from it, continue to adapt.
Plan your content well in advance. Spend some time talking to the people who are really close to the stories, the conservators, the V people who do tours, the curators. Look at the stories you've got, check the search volumes on Google for those stories to help you to decide what are the priorities and in what order to tell them. We used Miro to help us plan out a story map so that we could see if there were any gaps in the spread of stories that we were telling. That might be a useful tool to look at as well. But in short, I would say don't underestimate the amount of time it's going to take you to make those content decisions and to produce and to approve the content.
I think one of the interesting parts of it is repeatability. It's very easy to think about the ways of bulk uploading data to get the analysis, but it's important to remember that the collections data is a living and breathing entity, and it will change and evolve through time. So you need to make sure that your integrations with AI services also respond to the changes that are made at the curatorial level.
Alt text is really important because it means that no one is missing out on the story you're trying to tell as an organisation. And alt text really, in its best sense, bridges the gap between your visual and your non-visual content. And I think there are three really important reasons why alt text is so powerful and important to be considering on your website. And the first and the most important is really around accessibility. So there are over 2 million people in the UK who are dealing with sight loss or visual impairments, and for them to interact with the web, the use of a screen reader is often a really important thing. And screen readers rely heavily on alt text to be able to present that content back to the user that's using them. And alt text is not just about describing an image. Alt text is just as much about the context of that image as well. There are a couple of other side benefits for using alt text as well, and it can give users content and context when they have a poor connection and, say for example, the images don't load on the site. And there's also the SEO benefit as well. So often search engines, when they're crawling a site, will look at images as well, and if they have alt text, then that will also help them to perform better in your search rankings too.
So we knew we needed to be able to create alt text for our collection online, but we have 190,000 plus records. So the idea of using humans to do that was impossible. It seemed like AI was a sensible place to look. So we looked at a number of tools and in the end decided on a tool called AI Alt Text. We found the tool to be really surprisingly accurate in the way that it's using image recognition to generate alt text for images. Obviously, there was some concern about the levels of accuracy and also about the levels of sensitivity in the way that it contextualizes and describes what it's seeing. So we spent some time working with our curators to push some particularly sensitive images through and see what the descriptions came back like. So we used images where gender, for example, was not clear of an individual, or where a photograph of a race-related protest with banners. And each time, actually, the alt text generated was really sensitive and considerate about the way that it described what it was seeing, and extremely accurate. So after we ran a number of tests, our curatorial team were confident that it would be able to deliver at least the level of accuracy and a minimum level of error to be of benefit to the public. So with AI alt text, you're able to choose from 3 different levels of detail in the sort of descriptive text that it assigns to images. The most basic level, matter of fact, is the shortest and is very sort of simplistic in the way that it describes what it's seeing. The next level up is called concise, which is a little warmer. And the top level is detail, which can be a little bit flowery, we thought, in the way that it appended the basic description of images. So we chose the middle option, which is concise. We think it has the right level of warmth and the right level of descriptive detail. The level of accuracy with AI alt text has generally been really great, but we are noticing a couple of different types of error. In the first type of error, it reads the image as white dot on a white background. We don't know why that's happening. but it's happening for a small number of images, around 100, and it's easy to spot which images it's affecting because it's a consistent error. So we can search out when that error occurs and have a human review that image and create new alt text. The second type of error is when it doesn't recognise the image and comes up with an alt text that is inaccurate. So in the example that we're going to show you, it's looking at the gold frame of a purse shot from above on a black background, and it thinks it's seeing a gold bracelet. I would argue that a human would probably have got the description wrong for that image as well. And here in this other example, it's looking at a photograph of the Queen, but it doesn't recognise that it's the Queen, and so it describes her as an older woman. So not technically incorrect, but you would want to be able to say that it was a Queen. So in both of those cases, we would have a human review them. The problem is they are difficult to spot. So we've done two things to address that. First of all, we've added a button on every object detail page where users can report an issue if they find one. If they report an issue with alt text, then it gets reviewed by a human and corrected. And we've created an interface where that review can happen and the new alt text can be added. And in the interface, they will see the incorrectly generated alt text alongside the original object description from our collections database and the image itself, so that they can make an informed decision and improve the alt text. Have some conversations internally first about what you think are acceptable margins of error in terms of risk reward, and also to make sure that, it won't be 100% perfect. So make sure that you have considered how people will flag when there are issues and what the workflow will be for fixing those issues using humans. The other area of the project where we've used AI is with our oral histories collection. So it's never been made available to the public before, and it's 5,000 hours of Londoners talking about their lived history, dating back to 1985 and covering an amazing range of topics. We wanted to use AI to provide transcriptions for all of these so that we could make them available publicly for the first time.
To integrate with the OpenAI Whisper platform, we had to chunk the audio content up into smaller pieces and then stitch the responses back together. That was the main challenge, really. As a service, it was very easy to integrate with.
Generating transcripts is one thing, but then working out how you're going to display them back to users is another important aspect of this as well. And one of the things we wanted to particularly consider is how can we use the timestamps to be able to help people connect where they are in the transcript to the audio file as well. So we worked hard to create a solution where essentially if someone's working through a transcript and they can say, there's an interesting point at 3 minutes, they can then click on that link and it will take them to that corresponding point in the audio file as well. And there's plenty of ways that we can take this further. We want to explore things like how do we use AI to essentially mark up in that transcript who's speaking, so interviewer, interviewee, person one, person two, and also how do we incorporate that into search to make search even more powerful, using the transcripts to enable people to go in even deeper journeys into the collection too.
Internally, there was some concern over the levels of accuracy that you would get back from AI transcription of audio. So we did some sourcing of quotes from transcription agencies, and the cost of human transcription for 5,000 hours of audio was coming back at £500,000, which was not an option for us. So AI seemed like the only viable route for us to get this collection online. We're using OpenAI's Whisper solution, which claims to have a 97% accuracy of transcription. And to test that, we put around 13 different audio files through it. And we chose audio recordings that were poor quality, where people had strong accents, where people spoke at speed, where there were multiple speakers, and it coped really well. So actually we saw a lot less than 3% error rate. And so we felt like the kind of risk reward was enough for us to accept that margin of error and move forward. So if you look at our website right now, as we speak to you in March 2025, you'll notice that the oral histories are not live yet. And that's because this opened up a whole nother level of conversation in the organisation about risk, around putting the oral histories into a public context. First of all, there are issues around oral histories that contain sensitive subject matter. Secondly, there are issues around privacy. For example, some of the oral histories might name a neighbour or a work colleague. And thirdly, there are issues with legacy permissions. So if an oral history was acquired in the 90s and someone gave permission for it to go online, then does online still mean the same thing now in 2025 in the context of AI? And does that permission still hold? And then there's a level of concern around generative AI crawlers, potentially the risk of sampling some audio and then using it somewhere else out of context. So there's a lot of stuff to work through. What we're doing, first of all, is to de-risk the selection. So we are removing the most sensitive oral histories from the selection that we put through for transcription. Then we are looking at a solution for AI to do a sensitivity review on the remaining oral histories. And the ones that we deem to be of low risk after that review will go to human review. And 2 different people will review those histories before they are processed to be made public. To anyone else who's thinking about using AI to transcribe oral histories, I would say have the conversations internally with the people in your curatorial team and your data teams first to assess where your organisation sits on that sort of risk-benefit scale and what the process is to remove an oral history if you find that there is then an issue with it online once it's been published. And it's a long and challenging journey. I don't think that we have the answers yet, and we are learning as we go along. But this is a really interesting and valuable collection, so we're really invested in doing everything we can to try to get it online. And the other thing that Transcripts will do, of course, is to make it searchable. So then we will be able to create connections between objects and stories and oral histories, which just makes the collections and stories journey even richer and more engaging.
I think the thing that's worth saying up front about this is that if you have data on your website and it's a public website, then there's always a possibility that an AI crawler will crawl your site and take that content to train a public model. There are things that you can do to restrict that, and you can request that those AI crawlers essentially don't crawl your site, but they are requests rather than something you can mandate. One of the principles we took from day one is that we didn't want to train public AI models on the museum's data. And that means things like when essentially a user interacts with a site in one of the AI capacities, we're not sending that data back to a public AI model to continue to train it.